It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David welcomes author and activist Nathan Monk, with music by Gianni. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to the weekly show. I am your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because even though it looks like we are on my set, we are not. This is a green screen. Proof. Marty, can you put me on the moon? How about, I'd like to forecast some weather. It is just great to be back on the air. According to a new study, the average member of Congress can only speak at a 10th grade level. This is pretty bad news because most 10th graders can only read at a 5th grade level. New research shows that hypnosis could be an alternative to opioids for pain relief, but there are side effects, like thinking you're a chicken. Psychiatrists are reporting that because of the coronavirus, loneliness at home is reaching epidemic levels. So if you're lonely, you're not alone. Speaking of homes, I fear my home may be haunted by the ghost of Biggie Smalls. So I contacted a medium. And U.S. border agents intercepted a shipment of counterfeit Super Bowl rings in a package from China. The rings were obviously phony because they're engraved with the phrase, "World Champions Atlanta Falcons." Speaking of Georgia, the state has been invaded by Argentine giant tegu lizards, which eat small animals. Zoologists say the deceptive predators trick their prey into believing that they can save them money on car insurance. And sadly, Richard S. Klein, who directed the TV game shows Joker's Wild, Break the Bank, and Win, Lose, or Draw, recently passed away at the age of 79. In lieu of flowers, the family asked that you send consolation prizes. And lastly, according to the National Enquirer, country star Keith Urban has laid down the law to wife Nicole Kidman. No more Botox, he said. Nicole is furious, but she's smiling from ear to ear. Anyway, we have a great show for you tonight. We have author Nathan Monk with his new novel, Miracle. He's been on the show before. He was a great guest then. He's a great guest again tonight. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are here today with Nathan Monk, or also known as Father Nathan Monk. Nathan, wow, man, a lot has happened in the world since you were last on the show. How have you and your family been holding up so far?
You know, it's been wild. As you can see, I'm here Skyping with you from my car/office at the moment. The whole world has fundamentally changed. Everything, the way that we're doing things now, the way that we're interacting with other humans. And of course, the fundamental question has been answered. Could that have been an email? And the answer is yes. So it's been neat to watch how things have changed.
It's crazy. So you're here to talk about your new book, The Miracle. Now, many people might know you wrote 2 books before your current novel. We had you on the show to talk about those before, but just a little refresher. How did each of those books come about?
So my first book, Chasing the Mouse, is a memoir about my experience growing up in poverty and homelessness as a child. And I wrote that around 2015. And then a lot of people reached out to me and said that though they really loved Chasing the Mouse, it didn't answer a lot of the fundamental questions of how to fix the problem. And so I wrote Charity Means Love as a way to be a sort of a guidepost for people to know how to create cultural change within their own communities, in their church, within their nonprofit that they operate, so that we can really root out and address these issues. And I've always wanted to write a novel, and this story just kind of stayed stuck in the back of my head, and it finally found its way out.
Now, a lot of our Pensacola viewers know your background, but for those that don't, you were a priest once. Thus,
Sure.
Many still call you Father Monk. Did your history of being on the inside of the church inform the book in any way?
So, interestingly enough, my time in the priesthood did not have a lot to do with this book. But when my family lived in Tennessee, which is where I grew up as a child, we were involved in sort of these Pentecostal faith healing churches, and that sort of prosperity gospel type congregation. And growing up in that and seeing that world, and growing up, I mean, I went to, my parents would take me to the Trinity Broadcasting Network on the weekend, and all these self-proclaimed prophets would come out and supposedly heal people, and then they'd pass around the plate and make their money and do their thing. And so a lot of my experience in growing up and a lot of the things that I saw during that time informed a lot of the story of this book. I think really in a lot of ways, it was me coming to terms with having to address that concept of what really is a miracle. And what would that actually look like in a modern context?
Now, this is your first novel. What was it like
Sure.
transitioning from writing nonfiction to writing, the great American novel, so to speak?
My favorite part is that I didn't have to tell the truth, right? And so when you're writing something that is true, you have a real responsibility to make sure that you are staying as true as possible, right? So if I was telling the story, let's say in another book, I'm writing the story about the times you and I have hung out. I'm going to check with you. I'm going to call you and say, hey, David, this is the chapter I've written that tells the story of the time that we hung out. Will you read this and see if it's true to you? Is this true to your memories? There's a lot of having to check yourself in those moments and make sure that you're being honest and integrous, and that you're not unfairly casting someone in a negative light, even if they hurt you, those types of things. Even positive stories, you have to be very cautious and make sure that you're not exaggerating the details and doing all this good stuff. Writing a novel, you can go wild. It was like having, as a writer, it was like being on a playground without any rules. It was just being able to tell a story and go in any direction I wanted to with these characters, and take them on any journeys and any side stories that I wanted to, with very limited rules. And that was an exciting experience.
Nathan, we are going to go to a commercial break, and then we'll be right back with Father Nathan Monk. And we are back with Father Nathan Monk, talking about his new book, The Miracle. You mentioned on social media that you thought your editor would look at the manuscript and essentially say, nope, not this time, but that's not happened. What was that conversation like?
So it was really interesting because especially how fast the book came together. I really thought I was going to just be told, this is just brain garbage, right? And it has zero value. It was kind of hard to feel very confident about the book because it came about, so fast. And unlike my other two works where I had this time to really work with it and tailor it and make sure that I had made sure every single word fit exactly where I wanted to, this just, because of the way that it flowed, I really did think it was going to be one of those situations where, editor would look at it and go, this is garbage and it deserves to be put in the trash. And every step of the way, as people started reading it, I was getting this very opposite reaction. People would come back. I mean, people that don't even cry would come back just being like, I cried, so many times in this book. It hit me on so many different levels. And I just wasn't expecting that type of reaction to something that came so quickly.
Now, we've built this up a lot. So tell
Sure.
us the story of the book And why was the story itself so important to write?
So the premise of the book is it's about a guy named Patrick Thackeray, and he is a third generation faith healer. And his family has had this church in their family for 3 generations. His grandfather rather, used to be a tent revivalist and travel all over the country doing these tent revivals and faith healing sessions. And then his father attempted to turn it into a mega church, and his father dies earlier in life than would be expected. And so Patrick and his wife have to abandon their dreams of going into the medical profession and becoming a teacher to go and pastor this church that he never wanted to be in charge of. And so, I think that's a story that a lot of us can, even if, the characters themselves and their actual lived experience isn't exactly like ours, we've all had moments like that where we thought we were going to be heading in one direction and get pulled in another. And so what ends up happening for Patrick is he really doesn't have the same faith and zeal that his parents did until his wife is given a terminal diagnosis for a brain tumor. And all of a sudden, he has to come to terms with whether or not he believes God could actually perform a miracle in her life.
It's funny how people often find God the moment their bus is going over a cliff.
Right. And it was one of those moments. And they believe that she is healed. And all of a sudden, his life turns upside down. Even though he doesn't have a tremendous amount of faith, all of a sudden, overnight, his congregation goes from being a small church of, a couple of hundred to thousands of people traveling all over the world trying to be healed by him. And ultimately, it turns out that his wife's diagnosis was a false diagnosis. And he has to come to terms with the fact of what it really means to receive healing, what it means to have grace, and what a miracle would really look like. And I think a lot of times, like you were just saying, we wait until the bus is going over the cliff. A lot of times we kind of write the check that we want God to sign off on, right? We say, hey, listen, this horrible thing is happening in my life, and I want you to fix it. And here's exactly the way that I want you to fix it. And this is the thing that I want you to do. Could you please sign off? And I remember hearing this wonderful story about there was a true story about a family. Their kid had gotten hit in a car accident. They died. They give all of their organs away. 6 other people live as a result of this. Mm-hmm. Whose prayer did God answer?
No.
And so, it was one of those scenarios where I wanted to kind of tell a story of, we have an idea of how we think that things need to go. But we also have all these opportunities where we could actually create the solutions without having to sit around and wait for
divine intervention.
For some divine intervention. And, I know you're a very philanthropic person. Both you and your wife are in your personal life. And there's those things that we do when we give of our time, our resources, our talents. That is miraculous in and of itself without us having to relay any other sort of divine intention. And so that's kind of some of the subjects that this book really delves into is this guy who's grown up in this world of faith healing, having to look at his life and everything that he knew come falling apart and what that means to rebuild it.
Would you, so I guess you could kind of describe it as a faith-based book, but I don't know if you'd call it a Christian book, but it is basically a kind of a faith-based book, I would assume, yeah?
Sure. To me, the whole narrative is about looking at what it means to have faith, what it means to be a believer, what it means to trust, what it means to have grace from a totally modern perspective. For so often, we look backwards for the answers, right? We look back 2,000 years, 3,000 years to find the answers. And this to me was sort of a modern fable of what would it be like if we interacted in a divine way now? What would it be like if we met some of these same characters that we read about in sacred scripture, but we met them now? What would they look like? What would they be like? Would they, if we met St. Peter today, I doubt he would look like the statues and the icons that we've seen. And so writing these characters in flawed ways and imperfect ways and modern ways was a very unique experience for me.
And because it's in novel form, I presume it's not preachy, which I think people are much more receptive to the message when it's a story and it's not something somebody is saying, you must believe this in this way. It's a
Absolutely.
novel. It's for you to accept or not to accept, or to learn from or not learn from.
Well, and the thing is, what I love about, kind of like I alluded to before with the novel, is it isn't a theology. Nothing about this is trying to dissuade someone in one direction or another. It's a story. It's a story for people to like or dislike, to enjoy or not enjoy, to cry over or use as toilet paper. It is just something that tells a story about a guy and his experience of what it means to watch his life kind of fall apart, and then slowly what it means to put that back together.
Nathan, we're going to go to another commercial break. Then when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the homeless shelter things you do and how the virus has affected that. We'll be right back after these messages with Father Nathan Monk. And we are back with author Nathan Monk. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the virus amidst all this. As many people know, you run a homeless shelter near Pensacola. How has this virus affected the work that you guys do?
So it's been very interesting. I mean, one of the things that we have tried to do at our shelter is create an environment of and a culture there that is very loving and kind. And, we treat all of our clients with dignity and respect and courtesy. All of our volunteers and all of our staff are trained in customer service to make sure that we are treating people the same way that you would receive quality service at your local Starbucks or wherever. And so we want to make sure that when people walk in, they're being greeted, that they're being treated with respect, that they're and so all of a sudden, everything's been turned on its heels. So we've really had to get inventive about how we're interacting with people and making sure that everyone's staying safe. So, one of the things that we're very fortunate in that a lot of other people don't have to deal with is that we already had disease control measures in place there at the shelter, because that's just a reality that we face on a daily basis with individuals who don't have readily access to, clean laundry, shower facilities, and medical care at the same rate that maybe you or I would. So we already had some measures in place that I think really helped us out a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, though we did introduce, very early on, people having temperature checks, wearing gloves, wearing masks. I think one of the biggest things that has changed for us, and I think it's changing across the board for everyone, is that not only did the pandemic bring about a sudden and swift change in how we interacted with each other culturally, but it also changed our economy in a dramatic way. And so, all of our fundraising events got canceled or postponed. All of those types of things happened. So we've, everything that we've done and had to do over the last couple of months has been almost like relearning how to do your job. And I was talking with a friend of mine who works in a psych ward. And one of the things that she said that was so very helpful to me, because she works in the ER that's attached to there. And she said, they trained me in nursing school to deal with hurricanes, to deal with mass shootings. They trained me in nursing school to deal with all kinds of catastrophes. The one thing we never got trained to deal with was a pandemic. And when I heard that, it just gave me this relief, and I hope it does for other people to hear it, that no one trained any of us to deal with this. This was not in any handbook. We were not taught about this in school. This is something that happens once in 100 years.
And it's something you see in a movie, and
right.
And you go, well, I hope it never happens. And,
right.
And here we are.
And so, a lot of what we have been doing is making sure that we're educating our clients, making sure that they're aware of what's going on, making sure that they're aware so that they don't live in fear of things that they don't need to be afraid of, and that they're being cautious of the things that they should be cautious about. And so a lot of it is doing that. Many of our clients struggle with mental health concerns, substance abuse problems. We've got 2 individuals who are on chemo right now. So, there's a lot of concerns. What has been wonderful, and I think the story that I love to tell the most when I get asked this question, is how diligently all of the guys there at the shelter have worked to make sure that everyone is safe. They are very cognizantly aware of the danger of what would happen if COVID hit the shelter, and that it would potentially mean the loss of life for people that they consider their friends and roommates for the time being. So watching them all sort of wrap each other in bubble wrap and make sure that everyone's taken care of and is safe has been really heartwarming.
What are some things that our viewers can do that could help you and your shelter right now?
So I think, the biggest thing, if you want to visit onehopefulplace.org, that is our website. A lot of people have been sending us stuff from Amazon. They've been sending us toilet paper and hand sanitizer and masks. We're pretty stocked on those things, by the way, at the moment. So, but I mean, they've sent us all kinds of stuff through Amazon, and we've got a wish list up there on our website. And so, those types of things are a great way that you can still give and still interact in a way that doesn't require you to actually physically be present, and still do it in a social distancing kind of way.
Doesn't put anybody at risk, and good to go. Now, lastly, where can our viewers go to purchase copies of The Miracle?
So you can get it wherever you buy books. So it's available Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you like to purchase your books from. It's available on there. So just go on to Amazon, search Nathan Monk, The Miracle, and it'll pull it up.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for being on the show once again, and always enjoy the conversation. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan Monk.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's our show for tonight. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank author Nathan Monk for being another great guest as usual. Don't forget to get his book Miracle on Amazon. This is my son Gianni. He is now our musical director from our shows from home. Gianni, even though we are already home, take us home.